Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Enchanted by Her by Chelsea M. Cameron, narrated by Mary Helen Gallucci. Chapter 1. "Mom, I'm at work," I said as I answered the phone. I had told her 1,000 times to just send me a text message if she needed something, but she always ignored me, as usual. As her youngest, I might be a legal adult, but I was still her baby. "I know, Joy, but Anna really needs to know if you're bringing a date. She's doing the seating chart on her lunch break," Mom said. I leaned my forehead against the bookshelf in front of me. I was supposed to be tidying up the shelves, but instead I was fighting with my family again. This argument had been going on for weeks, months even. Ever since my sister Anna had gotten engaged to her fiancé, Robert, she, my other two older sisters, and my mom had been breathing down my neck to bring a date. In their minds, I was poor single Joy, and if only I was in a committed relationship, I would be happy, and they could stop worrying about me dying alone. It didn't matter if I pointed out that I had two incredible best friends, and a job that I loved, and a book club I helped run. Nope, none of that mattered because I didn't have a ring on my finger or a woman on my arm. They were all happily married, and they wanted me to have that too. It wasn't that I didn't want to be in a relationship. I wanted it more than anything. My romance novel habit had definitely affected my views on romance, and I would love nothing more than to be with someone. Anytime she wanted to show up, I was ready for her. "Yes, I have a date," I blurted out, because I was out of patience. If it would get them off my back, I'd say I had a date and worry about the details later. "You do?" Mom said so loudly I'm sure everyone in the bookshop, mainly books, could hear her. "Yes," I said, trying to inject my voice with confidence. I didn't lie to my family, ever. I just wasn't good at it. I felt too guilty. This was going to be a challenge. "Oh, Joy, that's wonderful. Well, I can't wait to meet her. I have to go because my break is over, but you call me later and tell me all about it." She hung up before I could say goodbye. Fuck, I breathed as I leaned against the shelf again. I should call my mother back and tell her that I'd lied. The guilt was already churning in my stomach like a bad burrito. Someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked up to find my boss, Kendra, standing next to me. Sorry. If I didn't answer, she would have blown up my phone," I said, and she just shook her head as she smiled. "Don't even worry about it. You know how my mom is," she said. Kendra's parents lived in Boston, but she talked to her mom at least once a day, and they came up and visited often, so she understood what it was like to be close with your parents. "I'm not busting you. I just wanted to let you know I'm doing a coffee run and see if you wanted a latte," she said. Kendra and I were the same age, and it was nice having a boss that you could also be friends with. "Yes, please," I said. "Caramel?" she asked, and I nodded. "Be right back." Kendra left, and I finished the shelves I was working on as the bell over the door dinged again, announcing a new customer. I turned to offer whomever it was a bright smile and had the breath knocked out of me instead. The newcomer hadn't seen me yet. She had dark brown hair that was long on top, and the sides and back were shaved into an undercut. My eyes traveled across her face, which was somewhat obscured by a pair of sunglasses, and flicked next to her right arm, which was almost entirely covered in colorful tattoos. She raised one hand to take her glasses off, and I caught a glimpse of knuckle tattoos, but I couldn't make out what they were. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice loud in the shop. The customer swiveled toward my voice and smiled. "Not right now, but I'll let you know," she said, her voice deep and slightly rusty. She hooked her sunglasses on the collar of her t-shirt and walked further into the space as I tried to remember how to get oxygen in and out of my lungs. I pretended to be working on the shelf I'd just fixed so I could calm myself down. You'd think, with plenty of queer people living in Arrowbridge, that I would be used to seeing beautiful women all the time, but this one hit me like a truck. My friend Lane's type, we'd discovered, was hot and mean, exemplified by her girlfriend Honor, that she was completely in love with. My other best friend, Sydney's type, was big tits, low inhibitions. My type? Tattoos, a hint of danger, and an edge of excitement. Everyone called me the sweet girl, the nice girl, the little sister, the friend, the safe one. Sometimes I got tired of it. Finally, I peeled myself away from the shelf and walked around, pretending I was doing something booksellery, but I was really just tracking the customer. The door opened, and the family that had been in the shop with us left without buying anything. So it was just me and the hot customer. I went back to the counter and fiddled on the computer as she browsed. I'd told her she could ask me if she needed any help, and I didn't want to annoy her out of the shop, so I kept my mouth shut and pretended to be busy. She disappeared into our romance section, and I cheered internally. If she wanted any recommendations, I was ready to pile her arms with books. As I pretended I wasn't watching her every move, she pulled out 3 titles and then approached me. "I'll take these," she said, setting the books down. "Great," I said. "Did you find what you were looking for?" My fingers trembled as I turned the books over to scan them. "I'm not sure. I'll find out when I read them," she said, pulling a card out of the back pocket of her jeans. "You didn't read the blurbs on the back?" I asked, knowing that she hadn't because I'd been watching her. "Sometimes I like to be surprised. Life can be too predictable sometimes, don't you think?" she asked, turning her head slightly to the side. She tapped her card to pay, and I read the letters inked on her knuckles. Love, with the O as a heart instead of a circle. "I do," I said. "Are you just visiting Arrowbridge?" It took a few tries for me to get the 3 books into the paper bag with the Mainly Books bookmark and the receipt. "No, I just moved here, actually. A whole new adventure," she said, taking the bag from me. Before I could lose my nerve, I had one more question for her. "How would you like to go to a wedding?" "A wedding?" she asked, and I brushed my sweaty palms on my skirt. "A wedding," I repeated. "Yours?" she asked, one corner of her mouth tipping up. That kind of smile could destroy me, but I couldn't get distracted. I had a mission, and the universe had dropped this opportunity in my lap. "No, my sister's. It's near the end of October." I willed my voice not to shake, and for me not to lose my nerve. If only I could be someone else, or even just a more confident Joy. "Where is it?" she asked. "It's about 20 minutes away in Redfield." Anna and Robert had wanted to keep the wedding cheap and local, so they'd booked a farm in our hometown. She raised one eyebrow. "Can I wear whatever I want?" "Yes," I said. If she'd asked to wear one of those inflatable dino suits, I would have said yes. Hell, if she wanted to show up naked, I'd say yes. And now I was picturing her naked. I wondered just how many tattoos she had. "Weddings are expensive. I'll need an outfit and money for travel and new shoes, of course. Let's see. I'll do it for $1,000, she said, and it took me a minute for her words to make sense. This stranger was agreeing to go to my sister's wedding after talking to me for 5 minutes, but she wanted $1,000 to do it? "What's your name?" I asked, even though I could have just read it off her card when she paid. "Ezra," she said, holding out the hand with the knuckle tattoos. "Nice to meet you." She trailed off, waiting for me to answer. This was not the first time that I was grateful that my boss, Kendra, didn't make us wear name tags. "Joy," I said. "I'm Joy." Ezra shook my hand with warm, strong fingers that were just a little bit rough. I wondered what activity had made those hands rough, and what else she could do with such strong fingers. "Focus, Joy. Shut those hormones down. Get back to business." "Joy," she repeated, smiling as she said it, as if she liked saying it. You certainly are. At that moment, I cursed my tendency to blush when someone said something flirty to me, and sometimes when they didn't. The door opened, and it was like a spell had broken. I'd completely forgotten that anyone other than me and the incredible woman in front of me existed in the world. 1,000, I asked, hoping that Ezra would tell me that the number was a joke. She lifted one shoulder. I read an article about a woman who works as a professional bridesmaid, who charges 2,000. I gave you a 50% discount. My mouth dropped open. $2,000 to be a fake bridesmaid? Are you serious? I was in the wrong line of work. You can make a career out of anything if you believe hard enough and can find people to pay you, Ezra said. I'm in. Are you? A flicker of doubt went through me. Why was the stranger agreeing to do this without having any other questions? I knew if I were in her shoes, I'd want to know all the details before jumping in. Maybe that was why I was perpetually single. I always had to know the details before saying yes to something. Let me think about it, I said. Confident, bold joy was gone. Regular, cautious joy had returned. Probably a silly idea to try and change the personality I'd had for 26 years. Something flickered through Ezra's eyes. People would probably call the color hazel, but it was such a boring word for eyes so unusual and magnetic. All those colors swirling together like a kaleidoscope. Okay, Joy, she said. There was something indecent about the way she said my name. It made me think dirty thoughts. Thanks for the books. She took the bag and winked at me before I could remember that I didn't have any way of contacting her. I dashed around the counter and looked out the door, glancing up and down Main Street of Arrowbridge, Maine. The sidewalk was packed with people enjoying their summer Friday. Where could she have gone? I squinted, trying to see that dark head of hair or that arm of tattoos, but she'd vanished. Short of abandoning the bookstore and searching through every other shop, I was out of luck. I went back inside the bookshop and sighed. So much for that. I'd probably never see her again. Chapter 2. What's wrong? Sydney, my roommate, asked the minute I walked into our apartment, conveniently located right above the bookshop. You will not believe what happened to me today, I said, setting my bag down and slipping off my shoes. Clementine, Sydney's cat, ran over to rub against my legs and meow at me that he hadn't been fed yet. Poor kitty, I said, leaning down to pet him as he made the most pitiful sounds of a starving creature before rolling onto the floor and staring up at me. He literally just ate, Sydney said, shaking her head at the dramatics. I figured, I said, walking over to the kitchen where Sydney was seated on one of the stools at the counter that separated the kitchen and the living room. I slid onto the stool beside her and sighed. You want me to cook tonight? She asked. No, it's fine, I've got it. Sid and I switched off who cooked, but we both knew that I had more skill than she did, so most nights I would make enough so we could eat leftovers the next day, and all she'd have to do was heat up a plate when she came upstairs for lunch. Sydney tucked one of her dark brown curls behind her ear. So, you going to tell me how your day was? You wouldn't believe it if I told you, I said, getting up. If I didn't start dinner now, I was going to sit for too long and lose the energy. I pulled some chicken out of the fridge, as well as some peppers and onions for fajitas. The suspense is killing me, Sid said, practically draping herself on the counter. Come on, I need some excitement. I'm dying here. As I chopped peppers and got the chicken in a pan, I told Sydney about my encounter with the stranger named Ezra. Have you seen her around? I asked. A gorgeous woman with knuckle tattoos? No, I think I'd remember that, Sydney said. She doesn't really sound like the kind of person who would buy pottery anyway. Sydney managed the pottery store her mother owned. Unfortunately, Sydney had not inherited her mother's talent with pottery, but her skills at business and marketing and organizing the shop had transformed the shop since she'd taken over for her mother. Still, being an only child meant Sydney carried the disappointment of her mother's dreams of being a mother-daughter pottery duo. Maybe I'd just imagined her. I mean, she literally disappeared. I flipped the chicken and then added the peppers and onions to cook. Joy got out plates and the bowl of leftover cucumber and tomato salad we had for a side. "What possessed you to ask her to come to your sister's wedding? That is so un-Joy-like," Sydney said, but I could tell she was impressed. Sydney was always telling me to take more risks and be more outgoing. Well, there wasn't much more outgoing you could get than asking a stranger to come to a wedding with you. "I have no idea," I said. "I think she was just so hot that I didn't even know what I was saying." Sydney laughed as I dished up my fajitas and moved aside so she could make hers up. "Well, whatever it was, I like it," she said, lightly bumping my hip with hers. "She wants $1,000 to do it, Sid. That feels weird." Sydney shrugged. "You have to respect the hustle. People are creating all kinds of strange jobs now. There are professional cuddlers, sugar babies. Hell, it can't be worse than trading imaginary money on the internet." She did have a point there. I shook my head. "It doesn't even matter because she probably wasn't serious. I bet that's why she asked for that much money, because who would pay that?" Sydney gave me a smirk. "How hot was she?" I closed my eyes and conjured Ezra in my mind. "So hot, Sid. So freaking hot." Sydney and I headed to the neighboring town of Castleton on Saturday to take advantage of an unexpected heat wave and get in some sun and sand and surf with our other best friend, Lane, and her girlfriend, Honor. "They're so happy, it makes me sick," Sydney said as we got out of the car and waved to Lane and Honor. They were a mismatched couple, at least when you first saw them. Lane wore a pair of ripped jean shorts that she had made out of an old pair of jeans herself, along with a tank top she'd bought at the bookstore. Honor wore a white linen jumpsuit with a black bathing suit underneath, designer sunglasses, and a black hat. Everything about Honor screamed classy. Not that Lane wasn't, but that wasn't the first word you'd associate with her, that was for sure. I loved her, but it was true. "You're just jealous," I said to Sydney, and she glared at me. That was true, too. Sydney could go on and on about how she didn't want a relationship, she just wanted meaningless sex. But we both knew she was full of shit. One of these days, she was going to get hit in the face by love, and it was going to knock her off her feet. I couldn't wait to see it. Sydney yanked her sunglasses off her head and shoved them on her face. "I'm definitely not. The only thing I feel right now is nausea." "Cheer up, my dear. We don't have to do any work for the entire day." That made Sid smile. "A day with no pottery." My day wasn't going to be without books, but at least I didn't have to unpack them or deal with any annoying customers. "Ready?" Lane said as she pulled out her folding chairs from the back of Honor's car. She might look like someone who was stressed about breaking an acrylic, but Honor took charge of the cooler and one of the beach chairs, while Lane wrestled with the other chair and an umbrella. Sydney stepped in and hoisted the umbrella over her shoulder, which was a task, because Sid did not pack light, at all. I used to joke that she needed more equipment than an actual baby. Today, she'd brought a whole tent to shield herself from the sun, as well as 4 different kinds of sunscreen, 3 pairs of sunglasses, 3 books, 1 nonfiction, our current book club book, and a cozy mystery from her favorite author, 2 pairs of shoes, an entire bag of snacks, and so much else, only some of it useful. Sydney might have a lot of shit, but Lane was the one who brought bottles of aloe lotion for potential sunburns and a first aid kit in case anyone cut their feet on a shell. Lane was always prepared for emergencies, and I think it was what made her such a good nanny to the twins that she took care of. "Riley and Zoe would like you all to know they're upset they weren't invited, so you're both going to have to make an appearance at their sleepover in 2 weeks. Lane said, as she huffed and puffed her stuff toward the ticket booth, where we flashed our passes, and then down to the sand. I'll be there, I told her, laughing. Riley and Zoe were 11, and just on the cusp of becoming surly teens who thought all adults were uncool, so I was going to enjoy my cool factor as long as it lasted. Me too. Love those kids, Sydney said. I don't like a lot of kids, but they're fun. I can't wait until they get old enough to make really bad decisions. Lane stopped walking and gave Sid a glare. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. Oh, come on. I've made lots of bad decisions and I've turned out fine. Lane and I gave her a look. Mostly fine, she amended. The four of us parked ourselves on a bit of sand to set up our chairs and umbrella, and Sydney put up her tent surprisingly fast. It's a skill, she said. And yet you wouldn't be caught dead camping, Lane said. Sydney shuddered. I'm allergic to camping. What are your feelings on the institution of camping? Lane asked Honor, who was deep in a celebrity hardback biography she'd gotten from the library. I'd go camping with you, she said, not looking up from her page. You would? Lane asked. Honor glanced up and smiled. Honor was one of those people who looked like they were living in the wrong era. She definitely belonged in the pages of a vintage fashion magazine, or in the golden age of Hollywood as a movie star, flashbulbs going off every time she got out of a car. Of course, I'd go anywhere with you, Honor said, stroking Lane's arm as Lane blushed and giggled. I stopped myself from letting out a little sigh at how cute they were. Sydney didn't hold back the little grumble from the shade of her tent. Okay, but what kind of camping? Lane asked. Would you go camping with me to a place with no electricity, no bathroom, and no sign of civilization for miles? Honor thought about that. Is that a challenge? No, I'm just curious. That started a conversation about what level of camping we could tolerate. I think I could rough it, Lane said. I'm not super confident in my ability to catch a fish with no supplies, but I think I could start a fire. I chaperoned a few of the twins' scout meetings when they were into it, and I like to think some of the skills rubbed off on me. I'm not shitting in the woods, Sydney announced. Thank you. I'm so glad we all know that now, I said, as Honor made a choking noise. Sometimes I thought that we were too much for her, but she didn't complain. I think I could do mid-level, I said, where it's kind of in the wilderness, but there's a town a few minutes away with supplies in case anything goes wrong. I thought about going on one of those shows where they drop you in the middle of nowhere with nothing, and then film you trying to survive, Honor said. Oh my God, I love those shows, Sydney said. I'm happy to watch other people struggle from the comfort of my own couch. You would not, Lane said to Honor. I cannot picture it. Your hair would probably still be perfect, though. Lane smoothed back Honor's hair that was already smooth. My hair is always perfect, Honor said. It had taken me a little bit to get used to her confidence. When she said things like that, she meant them, because they were true. There was an honesty to her that was so refreshing compared to the way I constantly tried to contort myself into a pretzel to make other people comfortable. My mom, my sisters, Sydney and Lane, even though they would call me out if they caught me doing it. Honor gave Lane a soft smile and asked her if she wanted to take a walk. Sydney decided she was taking a nap in her tent, and I went back to reading. Even with the screaming kids and the frisbee game going on near us, the day was perfectly peaceful. I lost myself in one of my top 5 books. Sometimes you just needed a good comfort read. Lately, I'd been needing them more and more. A message from my mom came in, asking for the name of my date to the wedding. Well, shit. Her name is Ezra. She just moved to Arrowbridge. We met at the bookstore, I sent her. None of those things was a lie. I'd just left out that Ezra hadn't agreed to be my date. The fact that if she did, I was going to have to pay her, and that we'd just met this week. Sometimes, with my mom, leaving out information was for the best for all involved. I can't wait to meet her. You should invite her to the bridal shower, Mom sent back. That was going to be a hell no. She doesn't know anyone. That would probably make her really uncomfortable, I replied. The truth was, I didn't know if Ezra would be comfortable or not because I'd spent all of 10 minutes with her. She was a complete stranger. A hot, sexy stranger that made me feel things in my downstairs area that made me need to go have some alone time. "Hey," a voice said, startling me out of my reverie. Sydney had poked her head out of her tent, her face sleepy. "Good morning, sunshine," I said, giving her a smile. "Hush, you," she said. "I need ice cream." "Right now?" I asked. Sid nodded. Now that she'd mentioned ice cream, I realized I had a craving for it as well. I sent a quick text to Lane on the other end of the beach and asked if she wanted to join us, but she declined. Too busy trying to lull Honor into a false sense of security before trying to dump an armload of seaweed on her head. If I didn't need ice cream, I really would have liked to see that, but right now my craving was a more pressing concern. I told Lane that she had to get pictures or video, or it didn't count. Sydney and I got in line, and she couldn't decide what she wanted to get, so I had her list her top 3 picks and then helped her choose. Sid was pretty decisive in most areas of her life, but food was one where she could never choose. "What are you getting?" she asked. "Chocolate, cherry, and a waffle cone with sprinkles," I said. "Rainbow sprinkles." "Oh, yes, of course. They must be rainbow." "Of course," I said, laughing. We finally ordered at the window and then waited around the corner where the pickup window was. Sydney cringed as a small child carried a very large tray piled high with hot dogs and fries and onion rings to a picnic table. "A seagull is going to attack that kid. Just you watch," she said. There were multiple signs around us warning about the vicious birds that would swoop down and take food right out of your hand if you weren't careful. At least once every beach trip, I heard the wail of a sad child that had their food taken from them. "I don't enjoy the suffering of others," I said. "I don't either, but you have to admit it's kind of funny." Sid and I finally got our ice cream and took it back to our spot on the sand with us, guarding our treats the whole time. My cone wasn't too melty by the time we sat down, which was nice. I couldn't see Lane and Donner, but I assumed they were probably making out somewhere. I was admiring the perfect amount of sprinkles on my cone when a bright voice said, "Hi, Joy!" I looked up to find Mia, who was my boss's niece. Technically, my boss's girlfriend's niece, but they were family in my book. "Hi, Mia," I said. "Are you here with Theo and Kendra?" Mia shook her head. She was 7 and more confident than a lot of adults I knew. "No, I'm here with Mommy and Daddy and Oliver," Mia said. "Oliver won't stop trying to eat the sand." I bit back a smile. Babies do things like that, don't they? Mia nodded. "Mommy asks me to help her watch him sometimes. I stopped him from eating a rock." "Well, that's because you're a very responsible big sister," I said. Mia was such a fun kid, and she'd adjusted to having a baby brother surprisingly well. "Tell your parents I said hello," I told her. "I will. Bye," she said, waving and then darting off to chase a seagull. "She's too funny," Sydney said. "I know. She cracks me up whenever she comes into the bookstore." Sydney and I were finishing our ice creams when Lane and Donner came back, their fingers entwined as they whispered to each other, their heads bent together. Seeing Lane so happy made me emotional, and I had to look away. Honor might not have been what I pictured for Lane, but she treated her like gold, and she made Lane smile every day. What more could you ask for? Now, if only I could find that for myself. Chapter 3. Monday came far too soon, as it always did. Even though I adored my job, it was still work, and I did have to gear myself up for a new week. "Coffee," Sydney said, as she did every morning. "In the pot," I said, as I waited for my waffles to finish warming in the air fryer. "Can you throw a few in for me when yours are done?" Sydney said through a yawn. "Of course." We'd lived together for a few years now, and our routine was pretty well established at this point. It was pretty convenient that we went to work at the same time.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?